feeling that I have, which is a good part of the way there. The half uncertain, half clear title is about me, not Tirana, not like the world. Like, I'm not sure about anything. So one of the things that I want to talk about today are like what I think is good and what I think I've done that failed recently. I haven't failed in Tirana yet. I don't plan to. I mean, I never plan to fail, but I'll kind of go through it. I'm going to of ours that certainly are bigger, better projects, which is a building group that we did in Germany, in Berlin, on Kurfürstenstrasse. It doesn't matter. But basically, I developed it not as a developer because I didn't have any money. I got 25 people together to build a house as a community, and in a really rough corner in the middle of the city. And this project that I did with my partner Johanna Meyer-Grobberger is a house where everybody has very, very different kinds of spaces and kind of lives on top of each other. So people have very big spaces, but also are sort of forced to interact in a way that wasn't exactly intentional, but also isn't a failure, and somehow works pretty well. So I'll see if I can start to explain it. Somehow, if you can imagine, these apartments are sort of folding in on each other. So like this room goes into here, which is sort of becomes the center point of this apartment down here, which then has another room that goes back, which is part of that apartment somehow. And so, while there aren't doors between people and privacy matters, you do end up with a kind of overlapping set of spaces. And that was really important to us. I mean, the premise, like a while back, like very early on, and I just show this. This was a time very unlike Tirana. I had years to work on this, and I was also 20-something. So I had endless, let's say, time to figure out what I thought was important. So I thought there were big spaces were important. I thought small spaces were important. Just like in Tirana, I didn't care about like the European talk or some idea about keeping some 19th century thing. Germans famously think that we should build as if the 20th century didn't happen, mostly because they're embarrassed about their role in the 20th century. So part of it was like messing around with that premise. And so, for example, this option, which is a totally different one, was like you would sleep here, and then your kitchen, dining, living would be up there. This comes later to something that happens in our projects in Tirana. And so what is it's 6 towers that then overlap. Like this is always low, and this is always high. This is low, high, low, right? So they overlap, right? And it seems quite complex, but actually it's just 2 grids, and it's given by the angles of the streets. And what you get out of that, again, is like quite extreme spaces that fold in on each other, and the apartments are not that big, but they feel huge because they're, again, interlocking. So this is, like I pointed out before, like a room from another apartment coming in at the top into the other apartment below. All right, and there's that same corner from another angle. And that happens, throughout the building, wrapping and wrapping and wrapping. This happens to be my apartment because I figure out how to make that point. But it happens throughout the whole thing. And so you end up with this huge spaces, low spaces. And you also end up seeing your neighbors, and you end up like extremely exposed, right? So you're kind of on this cliff edge, and so you end up that's looking out one window outside through to another neighbor, and then it's a crazy street where there's all kinds of action, so you also are like quite exposed to that, which is not how, German architecture is very much like about making kind of castles with very thick walls. And so this, and maybe I should have mentioned, I used to work at Sana, so I was, I guess, interested in blurring the boundary between inside and outside all the time. Right? And then as a result of that, you have to respect your neighbors, which actually turns out to be not such a difficult thing to do once you have that once you start to build that building, then you have to be nice to each other. Otherwise it doesn't work, and you naturally do. And I'm kind of surprised that my neighbors, with like one or two exceptions, are extremely nice to each other. Because you see them. I mean, sorry, I skipped over, but it doesn't matter. And then I wrote down camping because I also, as a result of this particular glass facade and openness and ill-defined space, like my kids were like a little bit uncozy, so to speak. And so I just bought them a tent in my house. And so they have a tent in there sometimes. I've expanded their world and it's fine, but in the beginning they were like, this is too exposed. And then that answer still works. So it is a little bit also like a cliff edge, if that makes any sense. New project. So something that I'm like kind of known for, and I don't know if I'm proud or not, is like I started making triangle beds. It's a little bit, I'm also a designer, and it takes a really long time to make architecture anywhere except in Tirana, where things go super fast. But everywhere else, like that building took, I don't know, 10 years. So you know, we had to start thinking about other things, and I didn't really want to do interiors. I don't really care about what color the wall is, as you can see from all these projects, even if it's sometimes painted. What I start to care about is how like living makes space, right? So the triangle bed works so well. I mean, you can imagine orgies and all kinds of madness on it, or you can think about like the nuclear family and different sized people, or you can start to think about how it makes for like quite quality spaces in the rest of the room. Just like next time you go in a bedroom, any bedroom with a rectangular bed, which is every bedroom in the world, millions and millions and millions of them, you know, the rectangle really dominates the room. And the triangle somehow invites you to like use this space differently, or to even if it's like crowded, even if you have a desk, like suddenly there's no direction in a bedroom, like the head doesn't really matter. I put the drawing with the head, but you can sleep however you want, right? And then you lie however you want, and then you're not oriented in the same way, right? And then it becomes a little world at the end, and so you get like different spaces in and out of this triangle. I'm just like trying to see if that makes sense to any of you. And that kind of continues on in our work, like trying to rethink regular functional beds, stoves. You know, it's very, very tricky to make a round stove, but once you start and you make a round stove, you end up with a kind of situation where by default you create gathering, which is an inherently architectural idea. I don't want like a big prize about it's just burners in a very nice piece of stainless steel, but the principle of trying to rethink kitchens or anything else as points of gathering become really important. This is to go backwards in the kitchen world. Like, I didn't cook when I first started. Like, I was an architect before I even boiled pasta for some reason. I don't know how I got. When you work at Sana, you just work all the time, and you get like sushi at 7-Eleven, and you just go back to the office endlessly. So you don't learn to cook when you work at Sana. Like, you just work all the time. And so I started like, okay, and here you see like 10 years ago, I didn't cook. I mean, there's a lamp on my stove, which says a lot about like this image. But I sort of realized that you could start to deconstruct the kitchen, because as an architect, we all draw like offset lines of 60 centimeters, which of course comes from like the Nazis, just for the record. It's always fun to make fun of the Germans, because I live there and I'm not one of them. But basically, like, in order that everything fits, like the kitchen bodies of IKEA fit the ovens of Siemens, like back in the 40s, they decided to like make that how you make kitchens. And so I realized that we don't have to do that. So then you get to things like this, where you start to, the thing about this, besides that it looks very nice, and it certainly works as like an Instagram proposal, the main thing is that whatever you do, you're looking at the other side. You're looking out the window and not at the wall, right? So you're either looking at the other person or the other view. It's really straightforward. Like, you look across, just like the circle. And so that became like a pretty important, let's say, goal of our work. I don't know what I want to say about these pots. And we make a lot of these, so I don't want to, and we're here to talk, we're going to get to big buildings in a second that we're working on here, but back to this other, so there's putting together, there's like work, people, humanity across, and then there's just deconstruction. And so for other architects, for example, Solid Objectives, who are also building in Tirana and will probably come give a lecture here, who are great people, we're doing their kitchen, where we just take each function. And I show these images, which are not like, those colors mean nothing to me. I just like that Rhino automatically makes them different, which is kind of clear and straightforward way that for me to understand it. And we do the same thing with bathrooms and, right? And then you start to care about function, like you don't want to slip, so I found this rock that doesn't slip when you get out of the bathtub, and then the rock becomes its own celebration, the tub becomes its own celebration. It looks a little bit like a New Order cover, which I like with the dead flower. Same thing where we start to like put the burner on the dining room table, so that's like another, let's say like a kind of just a slight shift in thinking. It's not nothing, but it's not too much something. It's like you cook at your table. It turns out to be really nice to cook at that height. And again, like it's just the Germans who wanted to fit a stove on top of an oven, like for like business reasons, that, you know, nearly 100 years later, we're still making, you still cook up here. It's a very strange thing. Maybe that's not always the case everywhere. Certainly in Spain and Portugal, they sometimes still have it a little lower. In principle, it's better to have it lower. I skip over this refrigerator for a moment. So what I wanted to start with, like what I'm trying to kind of drive at is a kind of human scale within architecture, right? This is in a Frei Otto building. It's a kitchen for Brandelhuber, for also another architect probably building here, my dear friend, although I think he said no somehow. And what I want to say about it is about, suddenly like this giant piece of concrete becomes like a body again, and then the oven is a body, the dishwasher is a body, the bean is a gathering. It's a very clear, let's say, organization of space in relation to people. It's not abstract. So going back, and this is also not abstract, we started to make furniture a long time ago, which is also combining things wherein the street light makes a place, the coffee table combines, and then the two combine to make another, let's say, again, a point of gathering. This one's very simple, like a chair that has an umbrella that makes a space in the sun. But when you sit in it, which is very hard to explain in a slideshow, you actually feel like you're protected completely, which is quite a nice feeling, which again was a kind of accident. This goes on and on and on. I won't go too much into it. And that brings us to like this other middle ground, because we care a lot about the middle ground between, let's say, interiors and products and proper buildings. So what we're doing, and I show it also because we're in school and many of you are students, right, is like we're just studying little typologies. So we're going, just to go backwards, like what this is about is like we just thought like, well, what are the different tents? Like the one that's a kind of version of a camping tent on the left. On the top left is a kind of awning from New York City, where I'm from, right? Which is a kind of way of making space, and we put a table, and then we redid an umbrella in metal. Excuse me. Oof. I'm gonna have a glass of water. And then we did what we thought was a market tent, and it goes on and on deep into the darkness there, the one that's more circusy, Buckminster Fuller. We spend a lot of time studying how structure works, and some of them didn't work, I should point out. Next time I give a lecture, I'm going to show the ones that failed. Well, there you go. That one failed. If you try to make it funky, it doesn't work. Like you have to make order. Like that one worked, but it was ugly because it didn't have the clear logic that's given by typology. Just like going back to the kitchens and the beds and the stoves, they look like stoves, They look like tents. They look hopefully like something you didn't exactly see before, but they're also not, I mean, they're readable. My children, who are 2.5 and 5, they completely understand what I do. And that's really important. And I ask them if they understand, like, do you get what this thing is? And I think really important to me, and this is true of the buildings, they do. They get it. They get it. I don't have to explain it to them. They know why. Maybe not why. Sorry, that's unfair to anyone. They don't know why. But they know what that Papa's thing is. They read it as what it is. So they understand that the table has a stove. They understand that that's a street light on a table. And they like it because they can read it. And I think that that's true for adults too. And this is just like the last thing about this. We're working on this light that's just a track, and the only thing that I made is this little stand that holds it at an angle such that the weight of the light holds the thing. And again, you understand that that's a track, and you understand that those are spotlights, and I didn't have to reinvent it. Which brings me to like another thing. There's a kind of big fancy American furniture company called Knoll that made for a long time like very, very the fanciest, slickest office furniture, you know, in the 50s, 60s, like high modernism, so to speak. And Florence Knoll made these credenzas. And I don't know if you know, but nobody cares about offices anymore, right? Nobody, I think that most of all the towers that are coming around us here are almost all housing. Right? So I proceeded to think like, okay, let's redo their basic office furniture into the domestic and make a kind of system out of it. Those are just two examples of system. And so what I started to do was like to take that office furniture language, and now this is my work, and it's like I didn't change a single detail. You read what it is, but instead of it being office furniture, it's house furniture. Right? And Knoll itself was like, oh my God, we don't have to reinvent anything. And I was like, and I don't even have to draw any details because they're done. They're like, do it exactly like she did it, which is kind of great. Like you can imagine that piece of furniture, and it's the company that made it since forever. And the little box makes sense. Okay, chrome is no good anymore, so it has polished stainless steel, and I made the hinge shiny, and I made the push to open. You know, a little like normal detail stuff. And then I let them, this woman Salem, who's so brilliant, she was like, let's make it yellow, and I was like, go right ahead, do whatever you want. And so we end up with like a whole new strategy without me doing too much. And when I can do that, it really works. But then I made this thing, which cost like $3,000 because I was like, let's rethink a vacuum cleaner. And then this person who I wanted to like collaborate with about this vacuum cleaner was like, Sam, that just looks like a vacuum cleaner, like a fancy vacuum cleaner, which is true. So like, just to say you can get it wrong, like that's stupid. Like that doesn't make sense. And I shouldn't make vacuum cleaners, and I don't think it's like the technicality of vacuum cleaners being the problem. I think it has something to do with the fact, you know, you can sit on it and wheel it around and it works, so it uses the office chair typology, and it vacuums fine. I mean, it's a great vacuum cleaner, but it's still like not rethinking how you live in any way. So that's kind of a failure. This one's like a thing where I'm not sure if it's good enough or not, so I talk about it. Same company, Knoll. Maybe you know that table from Saarinen, which is quite a fancy mid-century table that they sell a lot of. They sell a lot. And then, believe it or not, the rest of those slabs, they just throw in a pile. And I was like, and he was like, it's sustainable, we put it back to the earth. And I was like, okay. Can we use them? And sure enough, we make plates out of the table, out of the leftovers of those tables. Right? That's a shitty photo because I don't like any of the photos of it, and they want to make it shiny like the table, which is wrong. But basically, we're making plates out of the leftovers of the most famous marble table in the world, I think. We're making, and you can buy a plate, and you can buy a plate with your marble table. It's exactly the same, so I don't actually know how to go backwards here. Oh yeah, here. Right? You can have tone in tone, you can have another tone, you can have, you know, and they work. They're actually, it's really very pleasant. in this country where you can have marble plates for cheap, I highly recommend it. They're very heavy, obviously. I mean, they have some disadvantages, I'll admit. But again, the marble was, that's no joke. I mean, it's lying around. So that's like coming off, you know, the thing where I stick a street light out of a table is like, you know, 6 years ago. And I'm trying to get simpler as I get older. I don't know if it's going to work. And then I get nervous, and then I'm not sure, and then I get complicated again. It's tough. This is a complete, like, there's no, like, way to make, like, a side, I couldn't find a good jump here. But we did this competition that I think leads to, like, the feeling that I have about Tirana, which is, like, we did a competition for a monument in Leipzig where they wanted to make a kind of series of signs that started to communicate different ideas, like a place of like political gathering that had something to do with German reunification. And what we proposed, we didn't win, by the way, and I did this with Pier Paolo Tamburelli and Bauku. What we came up with was a kind of idea to make announcement. So like everything was announcement, like this idea that you could play music, that you could send out a message, that you could, that you know, it was a kind of memorial of a protest, but the protest is in a way about like sharing information and the future of how we make like public expressions, which again becomes quite an important part of what we propose in Tirana. Back to a simple thing, flower vase. I want you to know that it works no matter how big the flowers are. It's like an amazing piece of engineering somehow. I just got lucky with this one. This is just like, I thought of it one day, and that's the only thing that I make that anybody ever buys, by the way. Nobody ever buys that vacuum cleaner. Nobody ever buys tents, ever. I don't think many of you would take one for free, although they are quite cool. But the vase really works. Right? It actually works best in galvanized straight, the middle one, the low one. Technically, you have to have, you know, as soon as you put, if the flower gets like that big, then you need a second one, but then it works fine too. There's so many of those. That guy, that little Spanish guy who just like came in here before and said like, hi, but I can't come to your lecture, but I'm coming to say hi. He and I are making this project in Benin. So before we get to Tirana, which I think follows the kind of logic, a little bit of even also how I think of all the projects. We were asked to make a combined arts center and sports center, simple enough. I come to this touch screen. And basically what we did was exactly that. We put a running track as a roof. They need shade. You also need shade, but I don't want to like compare. Benin is super different from here, obviously. But they need shade, and so we made like a kind of ring of space of different functions around, and they have slightly different windows and slightly different variations, but it uses the local material, concrete running track as a roof, which is